Have you ever looked at your life and thought, wait, is this really it? Maybe you've spent years building a career, raising a family, paying the bills, doing all the things you were supposed to do. And then, one day, seemingly out of nowhere, you feel restless, dissatisfied, or even a little lost. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Today, we're talking about 5 signs of a midlife crisis. And before you click away, this isn't just about buying a sports car or having a dramatic breakdown. In psychology, what we call a midlife crisis is often a period of identity reevaluation. It's a time when people start questioning who they are, where they're going, and whether the life they've built still aligns with who they've become. Let's get into it. Sign number 1. You feel an unexpected sense of dissatisfaction. Imagine this. You finally have many of the things you once wanted. A stable job, a home, maybe a family. Yet somehow, instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel strangely empty. A friend of mine described it as reaching the top of a ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. Psychologists sometimes connect this feeling to what's known as existential anxiety, the discomfort that comes from questioning the meaning and purpose of your life. It's not necessarily depression, it's more like an internal voice asking, "Is this all there is?" And that question can be surprisingly unsettling. Sign number 2, you're obsessed with the past. Have you noticed yourself thinking about your younger years more than usual? Maybe you're constantly reminiscing about college, old relationships, or opportunities you didn't take. There's nothing wrong with nostalgia. In fact, it can be healthy. But during a midlife crisis, nostalgia can become something else, a fixation on roads not taken. Psychologist Erik Erikson described a stage of adulthood called generativity versus stagnation. During this phase, people often evaluate whether they've made meaningful contributions to the world. When someone feels stuck or stagnant, they may become preoccupied with alternate versions of their life. What if I had moved to a different city? What if I'd chosen a different career? What if I had taken that chance? The past starts looking better than it probably was because it represents possibilities that are now gone. Sign number 3. You're making sudden, uncharacteristic decisions. This is the stereotype everyone knows. One day, someone who's always been cautious suddenly quits their job, books a one-way ticket across the world, or makes a huge purchase they can't really afford. Now, not every major life change is a midlife crisis. Sometimes people genuinely need a fresh start. But one hallmark of a crisis is impulsivity, driven by emotional discomfort rather than thoughtful planning. Psychologists call this identity exploration. The person isn't necessarily chasing the new thing itself. They're chasing a feeling. They're trying to reconnect with parts of themselves they feel they've lost. And honestly, most of us can relate to that on some level. When life feels repetitive, the idea of reinventing yourself can be incredibly tempting. Sign number 4, you're hyper-aware of aging. Here's a question. When was the last time you caught yourself calculating how old you'll be in 10 years? For many people experiencing a midlife crisis, awareness of mortality becomes much more intense. Maybe you notice gray hairs differently. Maybe birthdays hit harder than they used to. Maybe you realize there are more years behind you than ahead of you. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as mortality salience, the heightened awareness that life is finite. And while that sounds depressing, it isn't always negative. For some people, it becomes a wake-up call that motivates positive change. The challenge is when fear starts driving your decisions instead of your values, because fear rarely leads us where we actually want to go. Sign number 5, you feel like you've lost touch with yourself. This might be the biggest sign of all. You wake up one day and realize you've spent years being someone's employee, someone's parent, someone's spouse, someone's provider. But who are you? What do you enjoy? What excites you? A lot of people in midlife discover they've become so focused on responsibilities that they've neglected parts of their own identity. Psychologists often talk about self-concept, which is essentially the story we tell ourselves about who we are. When that story no longer fits, it can create a deep sense of disconnection. The good news is that discomfort can also be an opportunity, because sometimes a midlife crisis isn't really a crisis at all. Sometimes it's a transition, a signal that you've outgrown an old version of yourself and need to figure out what comes next. So if you recognized yourself in any of these signs, don't panic. Questioning your life doesn't mean you're failing. It might simply mean you're paying attention. And often, growth begins with asking uncomfortable questions. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, let me know in the comments what's one thing you've learned about yourself as you've gotten older. I'd love to hear your story.